What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 410. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. You make it home okay, Luis?
I did. I despite getting savagely ditched by our coverage compatriot, Paul Chion, who woke up at 5 a.m. and decided to just head to the airport instead of splitting a cab, as he does. So.
Did he really?
And then
he had to be there at 7. When did you go?
We had flights at a very similar time, but I wanted to leave an hour later than he wanted to leave.
Oh, he was being a little conservative.
And then he texted me when we got to the airport. He was like, "Well, the airport was only 10 minutes away. I don't know why I got here this early." I'm like,
Please say that text woke you up too. Like scrapped that hour you were trying to get. Yeah, my flight out of we're talking about leaving Boston from the World Championship, of course, and my flight out wasn't till about 5 in the evening. So I went and saw a movie with some of our coverage coworkers, and then we kind of moseyed our way over. But good trip, fun tournament overall for sure. And got to say congratulations to William Huey Jensen. Great work, Jensen. It was really fun watching him win, and definitely a highlight of my coverage career for sure. We've got a little bit of an Ixalan archetype deep dive lined up for you today. We've had our hands on this set plenty now, and I feel very comfortable with some of the archetypes at this point. And so we picked 3 of the headliners, 3 of the most important ones to talk about first, and we're going to get into those today. So if you've been struggling a bit with Ixalan, this is the episode for you, because we've got this thing broken down pretty well, and this might reveal some of the things that maybe you're doing wrong or that aren't as intuitive. Before we get into all that, though, let's talk about channelfireball.com. That's right. They are the sponsor of this podcast, and some cool stuff went up on the site. Frank Karsten, good friend of the show, wrote an article about the bluff. We talked about the Osip Lebedovich bluff against Owen Turtenwald that happened on at the GP the prior week. And of course, like Frank tends to do, he went super deep with the math and the theory and stuff like that to help get it. So that's the kind of fun, alternate stuff you can get on CFB sometimes. I like those ones, Luis, the weird articles that aren't just the straightforward ones sometimes,
Yeah, I actually love me a Frank Karsten article. I whenever it's funny because I'm definitely a consumer of Magic content too, and Karsten and PV articles always get my clicks. So
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
A big fan.
And of course, while you're there, if you need anything for the old standard deck, maybe modern, whatever it is, you're going to find it at CFB on the store side, and you can get singles, you can get sealed product, anything you need, you'll get it at Channel Fireball. They get it shipped out to you nice and quick. Hey, if you need Ixalan, it's there too. And again, they'll get it in the mail, get it out to you nice and quick, and they always stand by their stuff. They're very good with the customer service. If you have an issue, just let them know. They're going to take care of you over at channelfireball.com. Show is also brought to you directly by you via the Patreon. That's right. It's real easy to sign up. You go to patreon.com/limited resources. What I like to say is, has this show helped you out? Has it helped you win a booster pack or two? Well, if you think so, you can give back and get some cool perks too over at patreon.com/limited resources. Also, I mentioned this last week, but I wanted to follow up. Extra Life. This is the charity thing that's going on down at Wizards of the Coast coming in the coming weekend here. It is 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. from Friday 10/13 all the way through for 24 hours. And they're going to be streaming the whole thing at twitch.tv/magic. And on top of it, Ryan's going to be there for 12 hours of it. That's Ryan Spain, as in the guy who started the show with me all those years ago. He, works at Wizards now, and he's going to be down there, kind of hosting things and running it through as well. His page is going to support Seattle Children's Hospital, just like the rest of the thing there. And donations through his page, he's going to be giving away a bunch of stuff. You can earn some Ixalan boosters, a pound of his WotC famous home roasted coffee. And anybody who works at WotC loves that stuff. He roasts it at his house, brings it in, and they love it. Or if you do a $300 donation, you can get a full Chaos Grab Bag draft set. That's 24 unique Magic boosters. And he says he promises some super sweet ones in there as well. So really cool. And then I'll also be donating some LR stuff, some swag from LR. And he's going to have some sets for that too. So please do check it out. These charitable things are pretty cool when they go to things like, children's hospitals and stuff. And I'll have links in the show notes for that stuff as well. Okay. Patreon question of the week. Very straightforward one, but an important question comes from Martin, who says, hey guys, what are your thoughts on drafting black-green in Ixalan or white-blue? Did you try it and how did it work out? Thanks for the great work. I did. I definitely took one for the science team and I drafted blue-white, I think 3 or maybe even 4 times now, just seeing if it was actually a thing. And I have come to some conclusions on it. Not really a thing. It is not a horrendous deck, but with no supported synergies outside of a couple of build-around cards, and even those aren't so great. Basically, you're going to be able to know how good your deck is by looking at the pile of cards. And it is a sum of the parts. It is not the type of thing where you're going to get benefits and bonuses just incidentally by having, say, a bunch of vampires or a bunch of merfolk. Instead, it's just how good are your cards? Because the strategy's fine. You have flyers. You have good blockers on the ground. You have some decent removal and bounce spells. It's all there. All the pieces are there. You can make that strategy work. And it does work here. But heavily dependent on how good the cards are in your deck. That is the bottom line, where other decks don't have that problem. And then the other thing that you'll note is that there's no gold cards. There's no gold rares. There's no gold uncommon. There's no pull to put you into white blue. So if you do draft it, man, you better have a good reason. Otherwise, it's just been whatever. So to me, it's like, I suppose you might want to know how to draft it if it's open, but like, it's not really something that you'll want to gravitate towards on purpose. That
lines up with my experiences with blue-white. I think black-green is a little bit more supported because it has Lurking Chupacabra and Wild Growth Walker. Just a couple ways to incentivize the Explore deck. There's a bunch of Explore cards in black and green.
Right.
But in general, you just should not be in these decks unless like it's just abundantly clear that both those two colors are open and you have maybe a rare or 2 rares that pull you in, right? Like obviously something like Vraska for black-green, or for blue-white, you end up with like some high quality
air elementals,
right? Some high quality white cards and high quality blue cards, and then it's just like, well, I guess I'm not seeing clear signals. I should just pull these together.
Right. The thing that comes to mind is why? Like, why would you draft these decks?
Well, again, it's just when you have high quality cards of these two colors, like maybe you just end up with like, Drover the Mighty Savage Stomp, but also like 2 Vanquish the Weak, 2 Contract Killings. And you're like, okay, well, I have good black and green cards. I guess I can combine them. But yeah, I would say most of the time you shouldn't be these 2 colors combined. And honestly, I think if you're not a like rabid drafter, if you do, if your sum total of Ixalan is in the neighborhood of like 10 to 20 drafts, it's very likely you should not be either of these color combinations at any point.
Yeah, I felt like I was sciencing pretty hard when I did those. All right, let's get some crack-a-packs going. This first one comes from Evan, who I met at the pre-release, actually. Thank you, Evan, for the pack. It's nice to chat with you as well. And let's see what goodness Evan hath wrought. Ryle? No. Bishop Soldier? One and a white, 2/2 lifelink. I like that.
I like
guy.
Bishop Soldier. I would hope not to first pick it, but honestly, it's not the end of the world if you do.
Yeah, I agree. March of the Drowned, that's the black sorcery. Choose one, return a creature card, or return a pirate and a creature.
I actually don't even always
pirates.
main deck this in pirates, just because this format's not about attrition as much as speed. It's a great sideboard card, and if I have enough cheap, high-quality pirates, I will put this in my deck, but I would never first pick it.
Nest Robber, how about no robber? Crash the Ramparts, no, there's better tricks. 3 mana is a lot, even though it is proportional. +3/+3 and trample is no joke, but yeah, you could just do better. Shipwreck Looter, man, this card's disappointed me. 1 and a blue, 2/1, raid, you loot. Do you like it?
I think you play it in pirates a lot of the time. You just need to do something on turn 2.
I always found it so bad.
It's trades for Bishop Soldier,
Yeah, that's true. That is, honestly, that is the best thing about it. It's just...
Also, it's not the best mana flood solution, but on turn 8, when you cast this and draw a card and discard an excess land, it did kind of replace itself.
That's true. All right, I'll begrudgingly be okay with Shipwreck Looter. All right, here's a good one. Unfriendly Fire.
The contender, 4 and a red, instant, deal 4 to a creature or player. It's a fine card, can finish off the opponent, can kill most things at its mana cost or less, and yeah, not much more, going for it, but you don't need much more to make this a playable.
This next one's gone up a bit in my estimation. It's Dive Down.
Yes, this card we had at like D-ish level, and I think it's more of like a C+. Like,
yeah.
I actively want 1 Dive Down, maybe 2 in all of my blue decks.
Yeah, I agree. And I know why. And you know, the reason is that it does actually help win combat, which you must get into, but also it's cheap. Like any type, like even though this isn't like premium interaction, right? It's basically defensive only. In most scenarios, you know, dive down actually ends up mattering in a lot of games. It just does. And when the format gets pushed down to the cheaper cards, any card that's cheap and interacts with the board goes up in value. And dive down's been kind of the recipient.
When the games are like 7 turns and most are decided by around turn 5, cards that interact for 1 mana go way up in value.
Right. And dive down's certainly
like an Hour of Devastation. This would not have been a good card.
No, definitely not.
But in this format, I think it is.
Agreed. Grazing Whiptail, another good card in my mind. It's the 2GG 3/4 with reach. We've liked this card for a while, and it really does do a good job of blocking. So if you are in the market to block, this is one of the better blockers in the format.
Yeah, this is a fine card. I think I'm on Unfriendly Fire still.
Oh, me too. Definitely. Demystify, Nope. I keep thinking this card's rare, but it's uncommon. Trove of Temptation.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
It's been pretty bad.
Your opponent must attack you with at least 1 creature each turn, and then at the end of your turn, you get a treasure. For 3 in a red. I
have not found it good. No, it's really bad. The problem is just that I've found it to be too difficult to find a place to utilize the treasure. And if you're, you know, occasionally you can get some value from the attack thing, but I've won the game, lost the game with 5, 6, 7 treasure. I'm like, well, that didn't really work. Kumena's Speaker. This card's been good. Green, 1/1, Merfolk Shaman. It gets +1 if you control another Merfolk or an island.
I like this card a lot. It's clearly a very heavy Merfolk card, and Merfolk is one of those tribes that doesn't overlap. Like this one is one of the more linear tribes. It's really hard to imagine being blue-green and not being Merfolk. So This is a Merfolk card with a capital M. That said, I think it's better than Unfriendly Fire. It's more valuable to your deck, but I would take Unfriendly Fire because I think it's better to try to figure out what's open than to commit this early.
I definitely would too. Unfriendly Fire just goes into multiple archetypes where Kumena Speaker's just, you know, planting your flag a little early. Oh, here's your friend, the Lurking Chupacabra.
Yeah, this is not a card I would take early. Basically, the only way I take Chupacabra is if I have like 2 green and 3 black explore cards or something like that. It's just not.
Can you say it for real? Don't disrespect the Chupacabra.
The Lurking Chupacabra. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Oh man, there goes the farm. We don't need to talk anymore about this pack, so that's the good news. Our rare is Sanctum Seeker.
2 black for a 3/4 vampire, and whenever you attack with a vampire, you drain your opponent for 1. So including itself, and also you play an attack with something that works right away. Yeah, this card's great. It's a build around, but also just excellent. Like, you take this and end up blue-black pirates, guess what? You've got a Sanctum Seeker in your deck.
Yeah, that's right, and it's pretty darn good. And if you're in vampires, it's probably your best card.
Yeah. So.
In fact, this is one of the things we'll talk about. Remind me to talk about this when we talk about black vampires, because I had an interesting thing I wanted to mention with that card. We're going to do one more. That interesting. Come on, just remind me. I will not be reminding you. Just remind the listeners will remind me. I'll remind myself here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set it right on my keyboard. There we go. Good boy. All right, we're going to do one more crack a pack because that one was so easy. This one comes from Brian Mazunka. It's a sweet name. Also, I believe from the pre-release, if I remember correctly. Thank you, Brian. All right, let's get in here and see what we've got. We've got Dual Shot.
I've played this my main deck a little more often than I thought I would, but I'm still not like over the moon about it.
Yeah, me too. One thing we missed when we talked about before is like ping my thing for enrage and their thing to kill it. Yeah. But
I think the enrage stuff is overstated. It's just not a. Yeah. It's definitely not a deck, and it is an interaction that comes up sometimes, but.
Yeah, it's not even that often. Yeah, it's really not that good. Slash of Talons. What do you think about the White Shock?
I think given the speed of the format, it's very playable when I have been main decking it.
Same.
But I'm not excited about it because it's also just a little bit, not slow, but like not what you want in an aggressive deck because it doesn't actually remove a blocker. Like, yes, you kill their 2/2, but they got a block in a lot of the time, so that's kind of annoying. It is pretty nice annoying, when you kill a Soul Sculptor, though.
Yeah, and also you just you see yourself racing so often, right? Yeah. Like even if it doesn't get a blocker out of the way, a lot of times they're just like attack you with all these things. You're like, all right. The one thing, of course, I don't like about it is that if they do have a combat trick, it can be bad. But at least you're only investing 1 mana, and you can also hide it pretty easy. All right, Mark of the Vampire.
This card has gone up in everyone's estimation pretty much. It's
I think so.
Just auras in general. Also, again, we sound like broken records, but the speed of the format greatly impacts how good these cards are. And it turns out if you get a meaty hit in with Mark and you get, a 5-point life swing, 5 points of damage and gain 5, it doesn't matter if they remove it or bounce it afterwards because you essentially got your card out of it. So
yeah, or at least if they do, you feel like you've gotten some percentage of it back,
right?
And because if you get 2 for 1 with Mark, it still sucks. Like you're in big trouble.
But if you land this on the Shining Altasaur or Aerosaur, and you just smash them for 5, and then on their turn they bounce it, the extra 5 life you gain will often make up for the fact that you did not. You got tempoed.
Sure Strike.
Fine card. Nothing special about it.
It's fine. Yeah. Shorekeeper. Have you ever activated a Shorekeeper?
I have not. I have not even come close.
I activated one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt amazing. And this card's bad. Sorry, Trilobite, but you're not good. Jade Guardian. This is this the plague of the format that some people think it is?
No, it's not. It's good, and I think it's better than it looks, especially because, again, auras are better, format's fast, and so it's kind of nice to be able to just play this, and there's a lot of ways to buff it in Merfolk with River Herald's Boon. It's not the plague of the format. You will lose to this card, though. It is a good card.
One thing that happens sometimes is people like cards that make them feel warm and safe, and they'll overrate them. Do you think that's the case with Jade Guardian? It's a hill giant. Right, but but you feel...
No, it's a great answer to Territorial Hammer Skull, I'll tell you that much.
Yes, that's very true. It really is. I don't know. I think the card's pretty decent.
Yeah, I think it's solid.
Water Trap Weaver.
That's quite good. Water Trap Weaver is a card that is not very linear. This is a Merfolk card that you'll play in your Pirates deck and be happy with it. It's just a great card. So yeah, I like Water Trap Weaver.
Also, it's, again, augmented in this particular format because the nature of the short-term gain from a card like this is amplified if the game doesn't last very long.
I also like it in Pirates when you have Siren's Ruse for your pirate deck and you just get to Siren's Ruse this, every now and then.
Yeah, we saw some Siren's Rusing of this, and then also, what's it called too, right? The Tempest Caller? I think we saw that on camera.
Yeah, that ended I think it was the finals of the team championship.
Sam lost. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. I want to say Yuki Ichikawa versus Seth Manfield.
Manfield. Okay. Yeah. So powerful stuff. Hijack. Even this format's not so fast that I think you should just be taking and main decking Hijack. Though I have resolved it. Yeah. All right. So we got some business now. This is getting businessy. We've got Jade Guardian, Water Trap Weaver, and now we have Pious Interdiction as well.
So this is a 3 and a white enchantment aura that makes it so the creature can't attack or block and you gain 2 life. Another open-ended card. It's good in red-white. It's good in black-white. It's just a fine card. I think it'd start with Pious Interdiction, but I wouldn't blame you if you took Water Trap Weaver. I don't think you're supposed to take Jade Guardian here. Again, it's better when the archetypes come to full fruition, but just like the Kumena Speaker from before, it's a much more narrow. If you take Jade Guardian and you don't end up Merfolk, it's not in your deck. Whereas if you take Pious Interdiction or Water Trap Weaver, you're leaving yourself open to red, white, or black, white, to blue, green, or black, blue, and those are good places to be.
Next card, a good answer for Pious Interdiction, but not a good pick. Crushing Canopy, 2 and a green instant. You can destroy an enchantment or a flyer.
I like having this in my sideboard.
Sentinel Totem, that's the one that exiles graveyards. No. Wily Goblin.
Yeah, I have not been impressed with this card. Red for a 1/1 that enters the battlefield and gives you a treasure. It is a pirate.
I feel like whenever my opponent plays it, I'm the one who gets the treasure because they paid 2/2 for a 1/1 with a minor bonus. It's hard to cast.
I don't think it's good enough. It's just the games where it all comes together, it's going to look playable. The games where it's not, it's going to look abysmal. That's not the range I want on my card.
Right, that is not the one we want. All right, now the business. Air Elemental.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with the old standby. I would take Air Elemental.
Do you like that or Pious Interdiction?
Oh, I would take Air Elemental.
I would too. I like being proactive.
I think this is also good in all the blue decks. Even in Merfolk, you just put this in your deck and it's fine. And it is just large. It is good.
Yeah, it attacks and blocks well, which is really nice, and it's at a reasonable casting cost of 5. Now, this is interesting, though. Our rare is Legion's Landing. White mana, legendary enchantment. It makes a 1/1 vampire, and then if you attack with 3 or more creatures, you transform it. It becomes a Danto the first for it. It taps for white, or you can pay 2 and a white and tap it to make a 1/1 vampire with lifelink.
I would take Legion's Landing. I think that the upside of this card is just very, very high. And
explain.
When this card works, it's extremely powerful because the ideal case is in a Vamps deck, because if you can make a 1/1 lifelink every turn and you have an Anointed Deacon to play, you're going to win the game.
But, sure. Yeah.
But even in red-white aggro, the fact that you can curve out with this and then start making a bunch of 1/1s, I think is reasonable, especially if you maybe pick up like a Dinosaur Stampede or some other go wide type card. And I think Dinosaur Stampede's already playable in red-white, for example, if you have like Frenzied Raptors and whatnot. And this is just such a fast format. I think you're just going to win a lot of games by having this in your opening hand. Or if you draw it at some point early and you're just like playing this on turn 3 alongside your 2-drop. Like, it ramps you by 1 mana when you flip it. When you flip
That's
it,
the thing that
like
people don't get.
Like,
right. It's crazy that part people don't get. Like, it enables itself to flip. And then when it does, you have 4 mana that turn if you've curved, maybe 5.
A 1/1 lifelink that flips, that also has the backup of giving you an extra land. It doesn't flip into a land. You still have the 1/1 lifelink. Like, that's already a 2-for-1 without even looking at the fort making vampires. Like, that is a 2-for-1. And so this card's very powerful. In a slower format, the pick would be Air Elemental for sure. But I think that given the speed of the format and how well the Vampires decks can use this card, I would be taking the Legion's Landing here.
Now, I want to ask you something. Let's say that you're sitting down at a live Magic tournament. Now, this is a double-faced card.
It's actually
so you
great.
take it and you like it because you're like planting. Just like the guy on the art, you're planting your flag here.
Yeah, it's super powerful because, like, so imagine that I'm to your right and you first pick Legion's Landing and you do it quickly because it's to your incentive. You've already thought about this. Now, if I'm looking at my opening pack and it's Territorial Hammerskull versus something like Vanquish the Weak, like, well, a black card, like, even if I think Territorial Hammerskull is better, I'm going to pass you the Hammerskull because I'm not taking a white card to the right of you face up taking a white card. Vanquish the Weak, I guess, is a little bit bad because you're likely to want to go black-white, but let's
do Fire Cannon Blast.
Yeah, let's change it a little bit, right? And either way, it's not going to make me take like a Jade Guardian over a Pious Interdiction. Like, it's not that strong. Like, I assume that you can read signals too, and if I'm not sending any signals, then you'll get off it. But it's a great tiebreaker. When cards are close, it's so good to do it face up. So it's actually a very big advantage to take these cards face up. People always want to. Their natural instinct is like, it's a disadvantage to give up information, but in the middle of a draft, it's actually an advantage. So
yeah. Depending on who you're drafting against, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose if you switch me and you in that order, then the advantage, becomes much smaller.
Come on, I play nice. All right, so there's our Cracker Packs. Let's get into these archetypes. We've got a pretty in-depth look at each of these. We're going to be talking about black-white vampires, merfolk, which of course is green-blue, and then red-white, aggro, and then dinosaurs-ish. Like, there's some dinosaur stuff in there.
I think calling it red-white dinosaurs is almost doing a misservice or disservice, but we'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah, I agree. I do. I think it's more like red-white stuff. All right, but let's start off with what I think is the best deck, at least from a consistency, overall, good commons, good rares, good uncommons, removal covered, and game plan-wise, thumbs up. I think it's the best deck in the format, which is black-white vampires. Walk us through.
I really liked how Josh Utter-Layton put it in one of his interviews at the World Championship. He said when all the pieces come together, especially at the uncommon level, Merfolk is the best deck. But at the common level, Vampires is the best deck, which kind of makes it the default best deck because the commons matter more than the uncommons. Like, you spike a bunch of Vine Shaper Mystics and Shapers of Nature, Merfolk probably is better. But given normal circumstances, Vampires is great. And so we're going to kick it off with kind of a one-sentence top-level strategy for Vampires, which is grind out the opponents by playing small flyers and lifelink tokens, plus ways to buff them. So what you want to do when you're Vampires is, this isn't a traditional aggro deck. I think the speed is like medium. It's not a fast deck.
It's way slower than people thought it would be at first.
Yeah, it's not a curve-out beatdown deck. It can do those things. Like, you can play, you can play a Bishop Soldier into Skymarch Bloodletter, into just like a removal spell on 4 into a Deacon, and that is going to be a fast draw, and your opponent is going to, feel it. But in general, this deck is actually way more often hitting with like one thing a turn because of a lot of the cards that you want in the deck. And Well, I'll kind of get into that because I think that the most important card for the deck at a common level is Anointed Deacon. This is 4 and a black, 3/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, give a vampire +2/+0. Mm-hmm. And Anointed Deacon means that when you have this in play, first of all, you're like, Skybladed Legion goes from a dorky 1-power flyer to hitting for 3 a turn, or your Skymarch Bloodletter hits for 4 a turn.
Right.
More importantly, it also makes it so your 1/1 lifelinkers hit for 3. So what you're commonly going to do is like make 2 1/1 lifelinkers with like a Queen's Commission, pretty dorky card. Mm-hmm. Then you play Deacon, make one of them a 3/1 attack with just that one. Now your opponent's not going to want to race a 3/1 lifelink. That's pretty hard to do, especially since this leaves the rest of your creatures back to block.
Right.
So they'll trade like a 2/2 for it. All right, next turn you make your other 1/1 into a 3/1 and attack. Okay, they got through those. You play a Paladin of the Bloodstained, and like you just end up being able to generate more tokens than they have actual cards because you're trading up, and you're getting chunks of life. So you don't care too much if they're hitting you with a flyer or a river sneak, and it makes up for the ground you've lost when you're behind because this deck can come out kind of slowly.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And it does make it like a complete nightmare for them to attack into you simultaneously, right? You've kind of got both things covered.
Yeah, because you're relying on Deacon or actually Pirate's Cutlass, which we'll get to in a sec, you frequently aren't like alpha striking. This isn't red-white that's turning all its creatures sideways. You're attacking with like your 1 buffed creature or maybe your 1 buffed creature plus a flyer each turn. And the rest of your cards are fine blocking. Like your Paladin of the Bloodstained sitting back ready to block, their Frenzied Raptor while you attack with your 3/1 lifelinker. So it makes it very hard for your opponents to race. So I want to go through the pick order for vampires. And the first thing to talk about is this isn't a pick order for pick 1, pack 1. Because pick 1, pack 1, for example, I would take Pirate's Cutlass or Territorial Hammerskull over Anointed Deacon. But I think once you're vampires, Anointed Deacon is the most important common. Afterwards,
which is weird, right?
Yeah.
You have to be like a little surprised to hear yourself say that, right? A 5-drop in a what we thought was an aggressive deck. I mean, that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, and it turns out that first of all, it's just so powerful at like punching through blockers, and because the two attack has haste. Also, the fact that there's just a lot of vampire lifelinkers mean that what you have given up by playing a 5-mana 3/3 that often isn't even going to be a 3/3. It's just not even going to get into combat. Is made up for by the lifelink. So Anointed Deacon's the most powerful. And that has a lot of ripple effects on what Vampires wants to look like. It certainly impacts how highly we take other cards that cost 5 mana because Deacon is the best of them.
Right.
So I have Deacon followed by Pirate's Cutlass, followed by Territorial Hammerskull, Vanquish the Weak, Contract Killing, then Skullduggery, which I have found to be excellent, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then Pious Interdiction. So you're looking at all the like removal spells. And these are all pretty close to each other. Like I think early in the draft, you can take Pious Interdiction over Skullduggery and feel fine about it, and
yes,
and all that sort of thing. But afterwards, you start getting into slightly more vampire-like cards like Vampire Zeal, Bishop Soldier, Skymarch Bloodletter, and then you're down to like the filler cards like Skybladed Legion, Queen Base Soldier, Queen's Commission, Paladin of the Bloodstained. So basically, your pick order for vampires is Anointed Deacon and Pirate's Cutlass. And then you're taking a bunch of removal spells, and then you're taking the vamps that you need to actually fill out your deck.
Yeah, like I'm a pretty big fan of Skymarch Bloodletter in the deck as well, just as like a super solid playable that picks up the things that you're trying to accentuate anyway, namely the Deacon and the Cutlass. And then also has like a minor bonus when it enters, and also has stats that are just like pretty good, 2/2 flyer for 3 mana. I think that card, I mean, that to me is one of the cards that I look out for as well.
Definitely. It's one of the ways to finish out games, and pretty good in a race. The 1 life matters a lot. So one of the funny things is I actually think Pirate's Cutlass is better in Vampires than in Pirates. Which
oh, really? Where you almost never get the free equip?
Yeah, which sounds weird, but I think that...
That's funny, man.
The only difference is the 1 free equip. And other than that, Vampires is actually much more well-suited to use the Cutlass. Like, putting Cutlass on a 2/1 is just not as impressive as putting it on a 1/1 lifelink or a 2/2 lifelink. And
especially an expendable, right, 1/1.
Yes.
And, like, these are cards you don't care about.
Yeah, you don't care if you trade the token off. And Vampires also, it can put up with the tempo loss of getting your equipped creature killed multiple times a lot better.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because every time you trade off a 1/1 or get a hit in, you've gained a bunch of life back, and it just doesn't matter that much if they set you back a turn at some point. So I'm not saying that Cutlass is bad in Pirates. It's great in Pirates, and it's great in Vampires. And I don't even know that it's necessarily better, but I've been liking the Cutlass a lot in Vampires.
Definitely. The expendability of the creatures is this thing that really stands out to me because the pirates don't have that.
Yeah, they are frequently going to
like it's a card,
run out
right?
of cards. Siren's Lookout and the Direfleet Interloper are great at like getting you more cards and improving your card quality. But a lot of the times you're putting Cutlass on random actual creatures, and when they die, they die. Like a Direfleet Hoarder leaves a treasure behind, but you still traded off a creature.
Right.
So
if he dies, he dies.
Some of the premier uncommons for vampires, the gold card, Call of the Feast. It's a fine card. It's not as good as the uncommons in a lot of the other color pairs, but it's definitely good. And if you
I think it's great.
And if you see one, you'll take it. Yeah, it is a good card.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it.
You also have a Duskborn Sky Marcher, the 1-mana 1/1 flyer that pumps attacking vampires. This card's good too. It fits with the theme of attacking with like one creature, and I think that's pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Bishop of the Bloodstain and Glorifier of Dusk, which are both 5-drops. So they're good in vampires decks, but especially like Bishop is just worse than the Deacon. So a lot of the time, I don't really prioritize all these all that much. So I think they're good cards, but vampires between these, the Deacon and Contract Killing, you just end up with so many 5s that you really should be watching this count and not prioritizing. And this is why I have Skullduggery so close to Contract Killing that like, if I have like 2 Anointed Deacons and a Glorifier of Dusk, like I'm just taking Skullduggery over Contract Killing. I'm just going to take the cheaper card.
Because you just need to get your curve minded. Yeah. I mean, how much would you like, isn't it weird that Bishop of the Bloodstained is just worse than Anointed Deacon? Because I think it is. Like the first one, I'd much rather have the Deacon. Right. Which is strange because one's an uncommon that is really vampire specific. And to be fair, the Deacon is as well. But maybe this is what the deal is. Maybe Anointed Deacon just feels like an uncommon also. Like,
yeah. And
if you would have told me that card's uncommon, I would believe you.
I think it's just funny that like it's, to get a little designery, it's not always clear which one of these is going to be better. Especially when commons and uncommon swap at some of the time, like it's one can end up in a spot where it's a little bit better than the one of high rarity, even though the cards look similar and you would expect the uncommon to be better. Also, the Bishop of the Bloodstained not draining, only making your opponent lose life. Like
that's a big deal.
That's the sort of change that I could see happening pretty late, and then dropping the power level below Deacon, even if that wasn't exactly what was intended.
Interesting. You mentioned Duskborn Sky Marcher.
Yeah.
I have bumped that one down.
You're not a big fan?
No, I am. I think it's a good card, but like I have it like I think that like it's right in the same thing as Skymarch Bloodletter, for example. Like I don't have it significantly above Skymarch Bloodletter.
Yeah.
Am I off there? Like, is the curve that important? Because
I can agree with that.
Okay.
It's going to be a threat of activation more than it is going to be activation.
Yeah. And it costs you a whole card and it's pretty fragile. It dies to Skullduggery. Like I find that this deck plays how you said. It's not an all-out aggressive deck. It's much more in the mid-range, go wide, chip in with little things, kind of leverage the fact that you can't attack me, but I can get in attacks. And Duskborn Sky Marcher helps with that a little bit. So it's not like I certainly wouldn't call it a bad card, but it looked to me on the surface to be a much more aggressive deck than it ended up being, in which case I like Duskborn Sky Marcher a lot more. But now that I know it's not, I've bumped it down a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good card. You're always going to play it in Vampires, but you don't need to third pick it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I don't cut it. I just don't prioritize it. But I do prioritize Call to the Feast. I think that card's gas.
Yeah, I think that card's good.
Fan. Yeah.
So when we're looking at this pick order, and one of the things we're going to talk about with all these decks is how do you get into vampires? How do you end up as a vampire? Besides, I guess, getting bitten by another vampire.
Well, there's also Mark of the Vampire, but yeah.
Which doesn't make you a vampire. One way, and this is true of all the decks, you start with a good rare, Legion's Landing or Sanctum Seeker, one of these cards that screams out like, play vampires. Like, great, that's going to happen some other time.
Vona.
Yes. The other is you've taken a couple randomly good black or white cards, like say Territorial Hammerskull or Vanquish the Weak or Pious Interdiction, like just generic cards that are just going to be good. And you see Anointed Deacon somewhere between third and fifth pick. Like fifth pick is late in pack one to just see a Deacon. Because what that means is that people to your right, not guaranteed they're never going to be vampires because someone might have, taken Vanquish over Deacon because just early it's good to be flexible. But they have to know that whoever gets that Deacon is going to see that and be like, oh, vampires. So if you have a couple black or white cards, or just like 3 black cards and you see a Deacon 4th, like that's a way to get into vampires, especially if you see like 4th through 7th or 8th pick kind of random vampires, your Queen's Base soldiers and your Bishop soldiers and just like the cards that are vampires but aren't super high priority for non-vampire decks. Like these are the cards that kind of send you a signal that the people to your right aren't taking vampires. And that's a good way to end up in this archetype. So once you're in vampires, that's when your pick order list should change dramatically, even though, at the beginning you want to take the more generic cards. And that's true of basically all these archetypes. It's so important to be in the open one that you're going to want to start with generic, even slightly lower power level cards, and then just open it up to, being more specific once it becomes open. Once you get a 5th pick River Herald's Boon or Anointed Deacon, and then you're like, okay, I can draft this, this combination.
Right. Or any of the gold cards, they always fit into that thing too. Because people tend to not want to commit to them early, so you can get them 4th or whatever. If
people aren't committing and you see a Shapers of Nature, a great Merfolk card like 4th pick, that's a great sign. Yeah. Because it means that people, didn't want to commit, which makes sense, but you get to. So those are the signpost cards. And again, 3rd through 5th pick is like critical for identifying these cards. You can't wait that much longer because you're going to be too short on playables, but you need to be able to identify this. So we've taken out kind of like a vampire skeleton. So it sounds like an undead creature. It's headlined by like 2 or 3 Anointed Deacons. And it's hard to have a really good vampire deck without like 2 Deacons. Because if you lose those, your actual tribal thing kind of falls apart. But Deacon really does drive the deck. 6 to 10 vampires or token makers. So a lot. 10 is at the high end, and it's awesome to have even more than that. It's not like you're turning these down, but you end up with a lot of actual vampires in your deck. 0 to 2 copies of Pirate's Cutlass or Mark of the Vampire. Mark is a little less good because a lot of your creatures already have lifelink, but honestly, the card is still good. Put it on a Skymarch Bloodlet and just go to town,
Mm-hmm. Ideally, getting the toughness of whatever you put it on to above 3. That seems to be a thing.
It's actually really good on Skyblade of the Legion, and you end up with a 3/5 flying lifelink. That's pretty hard to kill. Can't even get on friendly fired.
That's right.
And then a couple premium cards, because I assume at some point you'll open or get past like one of the higher first pick quality cards, right? You just have a random good uncommon or maybe rare in your deck. A couple removal spells, 2 to 3. And 2 to 3 combat tricks. Like you'll play more of both these categories, but that probably cuts into your like Mark of the Vampire categories because you really can't go much lower than like around 14 creatures or so.
You do need quite a few, and you do count your token makers as creatures.
Queen's Commission is just a creature. And then you usually are going to fill out your deck with like 3 to 6 creatures that are just random, not vampires, like Direfleet Interloper or what have you. Or Territorial Hammerskull. Just like playable creatures. Like Territorial Hammerskull is actually closer to a removal spell, but you are going to end up with just kind of decent-ish creatures in your deck. Like you're going to play Raptor Companion if you need another 2-drop. And you're going to end up with, that's kind of like the typical vampire deck with that even, and doesn't even have to have that many rares or anything. You can have a great vampire deck with just all commons and uncommons. Yeah,
you really can. I think that's its biggest strength. Is as you said, with what Raptor said, the base of the deck being at the common level makes me so much more likely and willing to go into that, because of that. Because I know that I can come away with a decent deck, even if I didn't get lucky and open up something really great or get past something really great. But I still give myself the opportunity to have that happen, right? It's like my deck will be pretty good. And then if I happen to get a Call to the Feast and somebody ships me a Sanctum Seeker, then it's like, boom, my deck's insane, right? But it's good anyway.
One of the reasons I really like vampires is that because of Deacon and Cutlass, you can end up with a good deck even if none of the great vampire payoffs at higher rarities are opened. You're not really relying on any of those cards. Like you can just make your vampire deck if you have identified that it's open, because that means in pack 3 you'll get a 7th pick Anointed Deacon. Like, that's just a very possible thing to happen if you're the only vampire drafter.
Yeah, absolutely possible. I have a question about the rares thing. This is what I wanted to bring up. Is it possible that Sanctum Seeker's just better than Vona? I know this isn't a particularly relevant...
3 white, black, 4/4, lifelink vigilance, and you can tap and pay 7 life to destroy any permanent.
I mean, obviously, if they were both 4 mana, you'd prefer Vona, but I have found Sanctum Seeker so solid in this strategy, given all the little 1/1s. It just turns them into you.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was true, but you are also correct in saying it doesn't really matter.
I know, but I mean, come on, we have a podcast about limited. Like, we get to talk about things that, while it will basically never be a choice for you as a player, it helps me to contextualize, like, how good are these cards relative to each other? Because I think it might be true. Like, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
This points to is just the speed of the format and the fact that, if both these cards eat a removal spell, at least the Sanctum Seeker did something. It does remind me of like how Vampire Nighthawk was better than Malakir Bloodwitch in Zendikar Draft.
yeah, that's a good comparison. Except for this is rare to mythic. Yeah.
So a couple notes about vampires. We kind of already covered some of this, but the deck can play off curve or high curve better than a lot of other decks because lifelink does catch you up. Often it will stall the board and peck away 1 by 1. So don't feel like vampires, if it doesn't get a fast start or if it isn't attacking with a bunch of creatures, it's losing. Like, that's often its game plan. And this also can actually just be a control deck. Like white and black have a lot of really good removal spells. So you can just end up with, like, if you have 5 or 6 total of like Contract Killing, Pious Interdiction, Vanquish the Weak, you can end up in a controlling deck that's just going to grind them out and win because it's got token makers plus deacons. And this deck doesn't care if it has like very many Queen's Base holders at all. Like, this is the deck that can just win the game on card quality and killing all the opponent's threats.
Yeah, the one other thing that really stands out to me about this deck as kind of a showcase is it shows how great lifelink is in a fast format.
Yeah.
Because this gives you the ability to really come back or truly stabilize a board where there's so many cards that can get you. One thing that we didn't mention that we should mention are weaknesses, right? Like, what are the downsides to this deck? The first thing that comes to mind is Fiery Cannonade.
Garlic, mostly.
Silver bullets. How about Fiery Cannonade?
Fiery Cannonade always beats vampires. This is the 2-red pirate class that deals 2 to each non-pirate creature. And yeah, it kills all their tokens. It kills all their X2s, and that's almost all the cards. So it's really hard to beat Fiery Cannonade if you're vampires.
So that's something to keep in mind.
Like, even later in the game, like, Merfolk has trouble with that card early, but in the middle of the game, it just stops caring about it because it's already resolved a River Herald's Boon or has a Jade Guardian in play.
Exactly.
But vampires on turn 7 is still probably going to lose to Cannonade.
That's what I was thinking too. Matchup wise, what do you like? And by the way, I kind of have a feeling already, like, I know how I feel about this, but are there decks that you just don't want to see on the other side?
That's the funny thing is I don't think vampires has like a matchup I think is bad.
They don't. They have all their bases covered. They can kill small creatures. They can go toe to toe in a race. They can kill big creatures. They have a good solid game plan early, but it also curves into a long game plan.
Like, even
this is all the reasons why I think it's the best.
Even against Merfolk, which has like the very uninteractive One with the Wind, Jade Guardian, or like, River Sneak combos, vampires can race it with lifelink. Like, it doesn't even need to. It doesn't need to kill it because it's really hard to kill it, right? Like, removal spells don't work on that. And lifelink means even if vampires doesn't have the fastest start, it can still race that successfully. It can just get to a point where it's gaining 5 life a turn off a token.
Right. So these are all the reasons why I do think it's the best deck, by the way. Because there's just, like, these answers are good, right? Solid game plan, good early game, good late game, no major weaknesses, majorly based on commons. Like, this is all just, things to me that adds up to be the best on average deck in the format.
Yeah, so moving off of vampires, going a little deeper underwater, we have Merfolk. And so the top level strategy for Merfolk here is outrace the opponent with evasive creatures buffed by One with the Wind and River Herald's Boon, backed up by bounce. So this Merfolk is fast. This is a fast deck, and it is not a control deck. It is very much geared towards racing.
In fact, it's actually an awful control deck.
Yes, that is one of the weaknesses that we'll get to is Merfolk plays very badly from behind. But it's very good at presenting the opponent with evasive threats, also resistant to removal threats because of, hexproof on Jade Guardian because of cards like Dive Down, and because of the fact that it's got unblockable creatures and flying creatures. It is just not interactive. It's hard to deal with these cards. So at common, Merfolk's pick order is a little different for a couple of reasons. First of all, Merfolk is much harder to get into while keeping yourself open than something like vampires. If you look back at the vampires list, it's like Vanquish the Weak and Contract Killing and Territorial Hammerskull and Pious Interdiction. Blue and green don't have cards like that, really.
No.
Merfolk's pick order doesn't really change that much whether you're Merfolk or not, because if you're taking these cards, they're just going into Merfolk. Like, there's no real way to, like, hedge on Merfolk, which is a disadvantage, actually. But, you know, Merfolk has, like, Shaper Apprentice, followed by Deeproot Warrior, followed by River Herald's Boon. Mm-hmm. Those are, like, I think the top 3 commons. Though, these are all very close. And One with the Wind and Jade Guardian occupy a weird space where once you have like 2 of either of them, all you want is other copy is try to pair as many as you want. Like
the other half, yeah.
Right. Once you have 3 Jade Guardians, you'll take One with the Wind over basically everything, and vice versa. And once you have like 2 and 2, you still just want more of each copies, and you know, probably biasing towards having more Ones with the Wind. But like these just jump up above all the other cards once you start assembling Tron there. You also have like Water Trap Weaver, Tishana's Wayfinder, and then Dive Down. I think that card's actually really, really good in this deck because a lot of your game plan is putting One with the Wind on one of your creatures, or just River Herald's booting your River Sneak and attacking for 3 or 4 a turn. So Dive Down is critical at protecting them. Mm-hmm. And then the key comes kind of filled out by Siren Lookout, not a Merfolk, but an evasive threat, and it smooths out your draws. So I actually found this card to be pretty good in Merfolk too. Once you move down to like the more filler commons, you're talking about cards like Depths of Desire, Storm Sculptor, Pounce, which is kind of got an asterisk. It actually literally does in our notes, because this gets better once you're heavier on Jade Guardians, One with the Winds, and River Herald's Boon, but it can be really like wildly unplayable if you're more of the Shaper Apprentice, Deeproot Warrior, River Sneak deck. Like if you can routinely have 3/3s and 4/4s, Pounce is a pretty good removal spell. Mm-hmm. But if you can't, the card is just wildly unplayable. Yeah.
So as you draft and as you build and as you're going through there, you should be thinking about that, right? Like the key is to not just autopilot and say Pounce is a green removal spell, so I'll take it. Oh, it's a fight card, I'll take it. You have to actually ask yourself, am I the Pounce version of this deck? Do I have cards that are going to support this in the mid to late game, or am I not? And if you're not, it's bad. Like you don't just go, well, it's Pounce, you take it. It's just bad. Like you do not want it in your deck.
The funny thing is I think more people are going to default to the other side, which is also wrong, of like Pounce is bad in Merfolk, so I won't take Pounce. But
yeah. So you got to like think about your individual deck that you're drafting right now, you know, to really figure that out. Right.
Yeah. Run Aground is also just like a fine bounce spell. You don't have room for too many because they're expensive, but I like having Merfolk wants like something like 2-ish Depths of Desire, maybe 3 of Depths, Run Aground, Perilous Voyage, just all together because it needs to be able to interact, but it doesn't have room for tons. And then Jungle Delver is an interesting one. This is the 1-mana 1/1 that you can pay 3 green to put a counter on it.
Where are we at on it?
I think you're going to default play it in Merfolk. Like if you are Merfolk,
one of them?
1, maybe 2. The cards that really matter for Jungle Delver are Vineshaper Mystic, the uncommon, the 2 and a green 1/3 that puts 2++1 counters on our Merfolk. That's the biggest reason to play Jungle Delver, because curving Jungle Delver in a 2-drop into Vineshaper, you're just going to win. And cards like One with the Wind really, you know, you don't mind just like building your own Delver of Secrets on turn 2. I think that's often going to be the right play. Also, Jungle Delver just gets you on the board, and the ability is useful more often than you would think. It's a mana sink in a deck that just doesn't have any of those.
What do you think about River Herald's Boon all in on turn 2?
That's less optimal unless you have a dive down or a bounce spell in your hand to like back it up, because your opponent's going to play a 3/1 a lot of the time too. And I guess Jungle Delver eventually gets by that. And then lastly, you have like Windstrider, which is a playable common if you want to fill out your curve. Like if you don't have any cards that cost more than 4 mana, you can play a Windstrider, maybe 2, and it's fine. The Premier Uncommons is really where Merfolk shines. Like the list is pretty long here. Like Vineshaper Mystic, I think, is the best one. Like if you see a fifth,
awesome.
If you see a 5th pick Vineshaper Mystic, you're just in Merfolk. Actually, watching one of the drafts at Worlds, I was watching Josh Utter-Layton's draft, and he started with like red card, white card, red card, but then saw a 4th pick Vineshaper, just took it and drafted an awesome Merfolk deck and 3-0'd. Like he just concluded correctly that getting Vineshaper Mystic 4th meant none of the people to his right were Merfolk, so he should draft Merfolk. And the funny thing is, he was directly passing to a Merfolk deck. They were the 2 Merfolk decks at the table, and they met in the finals.
Oh no! Who was it?
Donald Smith.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Oh, poor Donald. So he just got.
Well, the thing is, he didn't though, because he met Josh at 2-0 in the finals. And
oh, wow. Oh,
yeah,
okay. So he still managed to get enough out of the
They were the
second.
only two Merfolk drafters at the table, and it just so ended up that the packs broke well. I think that's lucky. I think in general you would not expect that to go well, at least not for Donald, but it ended up going really well. So Vine Shaper Mystic, Shapers of Nature, the gold uncommon, also an excellent card. River Sneak is fantastic too, the 2-mana 1 unblockable. And then Kumena Speaker, the 1-mana 2/2. And lastly, like Tempest Caller. I'm not as high on Tempest Caller as you might think, because Merfolk often just already has evasion, but you're going to play it in this deck and it's going to be fine.
You just think it's fine?
I don't think it's much better than that. No, I think like you're going to take one out the window over Tempest Caller most of the time.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Just because Tempest Caller is at its best if like the board stalls and you're just like Tempest Caller hit you with everything, but Merfolk doesn't really end up doing that. Merfolk is just like already racing you with evasive cards in the games that it's winning. In the games that it's losing, it's not hitting you with anything, and Tempest Caller is not going to save that. Like Merfolk can't. It basically won't get into a stalled board almost ever. So, the ways to get into Merfolk, and this is a little trickier because again, you can't really hedge with Merfolk. Like none of these cards that I mentioned are cards that, like none of the green cards are really good cards in Dinosaurs. None of the blue cards are really all that impressive in like Pirates. So you're not in a situation where you could float, getting into Merfolk 4th or 5th pick by taking blue and green cards. It's more like, how do you just started blue and green and ended up in Merfolk, or just abandon your first couple picks, which I think is totally fine in this format.
I think you just have to sometimes. Yeah, I don't think you should be happy, but it is interesting because the two of the cards that you mentioned as being just some of the best are River Herald's Boon and Vine Shaper Mystic, and those are Merfolk specific cards. Like those do not allow you to hedge.
And so the ways you get into Merfolk, one is you open River's Rebuke. This is the 4 blue bounce all your opponent's cards. This is the card Merfolk wants, not Tempest Caller. This and I think it's so much better in Merfolk than Pirates that if I open River's Rebuke, I'm really looking to be Merfolk. Because
you feel like what? That you can just kill them or just capitalize on the tempo gain so much or what?
Yeah, what happens
is how much better is this than Tempest Caller?
Incredibly better, because if you kill them in one shot, they're both the same and it doesn't matter. But when you bounce all their stuff with River's Rebuke, you get that attack, and then next turn they play just a couple of things and you get another attack, and they have no way to kill you on the backswing. Yeah. I just haven't seen Merfolk lose when they cast this card.
No, it also destroys vampires and any token-y deck, just gone. Yeah.
You could open Shapers of Nature and Vine Shaper Mystic, because I'm not happy first picking River Herald's Boon. Like, I don't think that's where you want to be.
Somebody did in the draft I did last night. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen. It's a very good card, but Shapers of Nature and Vine Shaper Mystic, these are cards I'm willing to take a gamble on. Like, yeah, I'd rather stay open, but I will first pick these cards if the pack dictates it, because they are that good. So I'll take them knowing that there's a risk I don't play them, because the upside is there. Whereas, I don't want to first pick a Shaper Apprentice. Like that's not how I want to live my life. So even though I think it's the best common for Merfolk.
Do you think that, we were talking about hedging. Do you think that when it comes to Vine Shaper Mystic, is it a reasonable hedge? Like, would you play it in a Dinosaurs deck? It's a 2/4 for 3. In its worst case, I could think of worse.
It's playable in a Dinos deck. Like, I think you'll play this card most of the time, but I think it's so much better in a Merfolk deck.
Oh, yeah, it's devastating.
I do see it as focused. And then, just like every other deck, if you see 4th to 6th pick, like premium commons, if you see River Herald's Boon 6th pick, like, you could be like, okay, I think I should get into Merfolk. So, these are kind of like how you end up in Merfolk. It's not a deck that you ease into. You just like either start Merfolk and just never get off it, or you just jump into it. You never are like, I don't know if I'm Merfolk or not. You're like either Merfolk or you're not, just because the cards don't translate all that well. Kind of like a typical Merfolk deck would look like is about 4, though you'll take more of this category, 1 and 2 drop Merfolk. So that's like Kumena Speaker, River Sneak, Deeproot Warrior, Shaper Apprentice. Like if you have less than 4, your deck's gonna be a little on the slow side. 5 to 7, like other Merfolk, like Deshana's Wayfinder type cards. 2 Jade Guardians if you can get them, because Jade Guardian, the Merfolk decks with Jade Guardian play fairly different than the Merfolk decks without them.
That's right.
Just like what they want to do is very different. A couple like 2 to 4 non-Merfolk creatures, Siren's Lookout, Ixalan's Keeper, like these are just cards that fill out your curve and are decent playable Magic cards. 2 One with the Wind. 2 River Herald's Boon, right? Like this is on the high end of having 4 total of these cards, but you do want these cards. And then something like 2 to 4 bounce spells or dive downs, because you want some good interaction, right? Either ways to stop interaction like dive down, or ways to bounce your opponent's stuff. And
you'll just need it.
Yeah.
I mean, the bounce spells to me carry a pretty significant load in a deck like this, just because, many of them don't want pounce. We talked about that. And all of a sudden you're looking at your blue-green deck and going, well, I just don't have much removal and nothing really at common. So to me, these bounce spells are a big part of it. Like the way that you can get ahead, stay ahead is either by having a bounce spell and punishing them for tapping out or for playing clunky cards or creatures, or by using combat tricks, namely River Herald's Boon being the premium card in the deck. Because I think it's the reason the deck exists is River Herald's Boon. I just think this card is just completely nuts.
It's the common, really big Merfolk incentive with the combination of Jade Guardian and One with the Wind is great, but the fact that Jade Guardian's a Merfolk doesn't actually matter in that particular interaction. But River Herald's Boon is really like the payoff for having a bunch of Merfolk in your deck.
Right. So that means that those bounce spells do actually carry a significant amount of weight, right? Get something out of the way.
Because often this deck can't rely on pounce, though that can sub in for a bounce spell if your creatures are big enough. And you need bounce to deal with their like lifelinker or whatever they put Mark of the Vampire on, or just like the fact that they played a Colossal Dreadmaw and you want to win the race. So
right.
Again, this is where it really comes down to Merfolk being bad when it's not ahead, because it's not like saying Merfolk needs to start out every game winning, but if Merfolk doesn't have a consistent source of damage, it can't play from the back foot very well. Its cards are just so bad. Like, they don't block well. Bounce spells are pretty bad when you're losing. They're not good if you're just bouncing your opponent's creatures. They're replaying them and killing you still. And if it gets behind on board, it's really hard for it to come back, because it doesn't also do giant chunks of damage. It just gets a consistent 4 or 5 evasive damage through a turn. That's when bounce spells are at their best, right? When you have a Jade Guardian with One with the Wind, you're hitting them for 5 a turn, hexproof. It probably just takes like 1 bounce spell to win that race. But imagine you don't have that Jade Guardian. All of a sudden, your bounce spell doesn't do anything.
Right. Yeah, that's actually, to me, one of the weaknesses of the deck, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Water Trap Weaver is very good in the deck, and once you have a couple of those, Siren's Ruse becomes pretty sweet. So it's Siren's Ruse is especially good with Tempest Caller, and if you have like Siren's Lookout in your deck, that's a pirate, you might get that advantage. And then don't be afraid to all in on just turn 1 Kumena Speaker, Jungle Delver, turn 2 River Herald's Boon. Just jam. Like, yeah, making a 4/4 attacker, it's like,
if I had to sum up this format, it is just jam. Just put Swashbuckling, your River Herald's Boon, and Mark of the Vampire. Just put it on your creature. Like, look, if they kill it, you'll lose, but like, whatever, they're not going to kill it.
Yeah, just turn it sideways, right? Yeah, when it comes to weaknesses for this type of archetype, I think that these type of decks tend to not mulligan particularly well. They're very curve out based. They're very get on the front foot, stay that way. Like you said, they don't have a lot of tools to come back. And, that's not a very well-rounded strategy. The good news is that you've got the tools to make that first strategy very strong. And when you do win with this deck, it feels like you can't lose. Because, there's times where you'll have a bounce spell and a big board state, and you're just hoping they tap out. You're just hoping they block because you've got the removal spell, or you got the bounce spell, or you got the combat trick, and they're just falling further and further behind. And in the games where you're all in, like the one that we just mentioned here, where you've got the Kumena Speaker, and then you make it into a 4/4 using one of the 2 commons that you can use to do that, and you're just smashing them on the second turn of the game for 4, and they're just looking at their hand like, what the hell just happened? You're going to win those ones. The times when you get the combo with the 5/5 hexproof flying, you're just going to win those games often, and so it's going to feel really easy. When you lose, you will lose badly. Like, there will be times where your opponent's quicker than you, or they put a couple of cards out that are really good at blocking you or interacting with you, or they'll kill your first couple of Merfolk, and your deck is slow and bad on defense, and you'll just get smashed. So you have to kind of have a good mental state to play a deck like this, because you don't want to overrate the wins because they felt so easy, but at the same time, you don't want to think, well, this deck's terrible just because you got rolled, easily.
And what'll happen sometimes too is if your opponent doesn't immediately have an answer, you'll get a bunch of hits in, they'll start chumping, they'll answer it, but at that point, you're not really getting card disadvantage, right? Like, even if they do answer it, because you got that card's back, or you just force them to play your cards in an order that's just not good for them. So, yeah.
So, what do you think of Merfolk?
I think Merfolk's very good. I have drafted it a lot of times. It's one of the better decks when it's good, I think.
Yeah.
It's just so hard to interact with. Like, the good Merfolk decks, your opponents can't block. They have a hard time attacking through like Water Trap Weavers and bounce spells, and they can't kill your creatures because they're Hexproof Jade Guardians or, River Sneaks that you cast Dive Down on when they go for it.
Yeah. Just make sure that you're always that you're always trying to be on the front foot with Merfolk. All right, one more archetype to dive into. This one is red-white, and I would just call it red-white aggro, though it does have a dinosaur sub-theme, and some people do just call it red-white dinosaurs. This is that same deck, so don't get confused. Top-level strategy for it, leverage powerful common removal and creatures in these colors to beat the opponent down quickly. It's straightforward. This is not a fancy deck. This thing does not have any overarching synergies that are going to blow your mind. It's just good cards in both colors, and they all tend to work pretty well together in the sense that they're all trying to beat down. That you're not finding random control cards in here or whatever. Speed, fast as you can go.
Oh yeah.
Basically key commons. Number 1, Territorial Hammer Skull. That's your boy.
That
right?
is the
That's
consensus
the
best common among the world's competitors.
Right. And this is the card that you get in red white. I'm going to put it, air quotes, dinosaurs. Card is fantastic. If you are looking to beat down, it does such a good job. It can take people completely out of the defensive stance, and it acts in conjunction with your removal spells, almost like an additional removal spell. It makes it impossible for your opponent to block. Fire Cannon Blast. That's another big one. Just a premium red removal spell at common, just 3 damage with raid at 6, get blockers out of the way and kill them. Fathom Fleet Firebrand's a solid common in the deck. That's the 2/2 pirate, for 1 and a red, and it has fire breathing, like you can pay 1 and a red to pump it. So that card's, good. You just need 2s, right? Like just remember you're still
the 2s are
straightforward.
quite interchangeable here too, which is one of the strengths of the deck.
Yes, totally. And I think that Firebrand is the one that you want the most, but it could be Tillinolli's Knight also, which is on the short list as well. That's the 2/2 for 1 and a red, but it gets +1/+1 when it attacks if you have a dinosaur. Is that right? Is it a trigger? I can't remember now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So that's a nice little, you play that, and then maybe you follow it up with, some even mediocre card like a Frenzied Raptor or something like that. Bash them for 3, and all of a sudden they're staring down 7 power, and they're at 17, and they're like, wow, what happened? A few other cards here. Pious Interdiction. We got that in our Crack-a-Pack, the pacifism effect. That is a way to get a blocker out of the way, and also buffs your life total a little bit in case your opponent's racing. So that's just good. Unfriendly Fire is a premium common in the deck because it gets a blocker out of the way, or it goes upstairs and finishes them off. And this is the type of deck that can get in for a lot. So that's important. And then I've liked Headstrong Brute more than I thought I would. That's a 3/3 for 3 that can't block and gets menace if you control a pirate. You will often have a Fathom Fleet Firebrand or some other random pirate around, and a 3/3 menace for 3 is legit. Like that will get into the red zone nicely.
Yeah, also this deck doesn't care about blocking all that much, so a 3/3 for 3 that says can't block is, I think, a playable card in this deck.
Yeah, I think so too. Filler commons, Brazen Buccaneers, the 4-mana Explore 2/2 with haste. You can play a Bishop Soldier in here. Sure. Come on in. It's vampires, it's pirates, it's dinosaurs. Everybody's welcome along, I guess, except for Merfolk. Frenzied Raptor, I mentioned already. Pterodon Knight, that's one that you can play too. 4-drop, 3/3, it gets flying if you have a dinosaur. You can do it.
I've liked Pterodon Knight a lot, but because it costs 4 and relies on dinosaurs, I feel like you don't want tons of them. You don't need to prioritize them because they're a card you can have too many of very easily.
Right. And that's why I have it in the filler common section. It's just, you don't have to really go for it. Raptor Companion, sure. 3/1 for 3, and it triggers your other thing, or for 2, excuse me. And one card I forgot to mention in the key commons was Thrash of Raptors. This is the home for Thrash of Raptors. This is the 4-mana 3/3, 3 and a red. And it gets +2/+0 and trample if you control another dinosaur. Playing something like Fathom Fleet Firebrand into Hammer Skull into Thrash of Raptors is really scary. Like your opponent's like, holy crap, I'm taking tons and tons of damage. And if you have any removal or any combat tricks to back this stuff up, you can apply massive pressure to your opponent. And that curve, those are commons. Like, we're not talking about curving out with some sick rare or whatever, no removal spells, just creatures. But that's a lot of pressure.
Well, Thrash is also one of the cards that really leverages the combat tricks best. Like when you use Vampire Zeal or Sure Strike on Thrash of Raptors, like your opponent's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, they're losing whatever they blocked with, and they're taking extra damage. It's exactly what you want. Premium uncommons, there's actually quite a few, which I think is part of the reason why. Yes, indeed, the mythic premium, the charging Monstrosaur. And once again, I think this is the best deck for it, because the red-green dinosaurs deck is whatever, but this is a deck that's much more aggressive than that, and charging Monstrosaur just fits perfectly at the 5-mana slot as your curve topper, and it's just, I mean, this card's so stupid. Like, it's just unbeatable.
Sky Terror's been awesome in this deck, too.
Yes, yeah, that's a good one. Sky Terror as well. Basically a 2/2 unblockable in most scenarios. That's what you want on turn 2 as well. And it's a dinosaur that enables your other dinosaur stuff. Adonto Vanguard. I said you could play vampires in this deck. Absolutely. That card is a premium 2-drop in a deck like this. It is exactly what this deck wants. Sure, you'll settle for the Fathom Fleet Firebrands of the world, but if you can get your hands on an Adonto Vanguard, that's what you want. I put Emissary of Sunrise here, though. I have to say it's the least premium of this list. It's just a good card. It doesn't carry any like really great synergies. It's just a really solid card.
And this deck often just doesn't care about its 5th land, so Emissary of Sunrise is just not as exciting as you might think.
Yeah, it's just still just good, but it's not what you want. Imperial Aerosaur, though, that's premium. God, this card also fits perfectly into the deck. This is the 3 and a white 3/3 flyer that jumps one of your creatures and gives it +1/+1. It's just responsible for 3 to 6 damage or whatever the turn you play it, and then it's a 3/3 flying threat that can finish them off. So this card is absolutely awesome in here. You get Ixalan's Binding, right? Just a good common removal spell. And then if you're lucky, you get a Lightning Strike as well, which once again fits perfectly into this strategy, given that it can go to the face and sometimes you can just get your opponent that close. I mean, these cards are absurd and they're perfectly placed outside of Emissary in this deck, right? Monstrosaur, Vanguard, Imperial Aerosaur, and Lightning Strike. Like, what the hell, right? These are all just perfect for this deck.
Well, what's interesting is, as we get into ways to get into the Red White Dinosaurs deck, you look at all these cards, and this is like the opposite of Merfolk. You're just not taking a gamble by taking any of these cards. They're just all good cards. So Red White is one of the decks that lets you stay a little bit more flexible because, you'll get into it because you first pick a Territorial Hammerskull or a Charging Monstrosaur, a good rare, and you'll see red or white cards. But if it ends up that red white isn't open, that Hammerskull can go fine in black white. That Fire Cannon Blast goes fine in black red or red blue, or even red green. Like you're not taking much of a risk. So the deck is very light on tribal. Sometimes it doesn't have any tribal things at all. Like it could easily end up with a good red white deck that just doesn't care about creature types. And when you're in that spot, then you did not waste very many picks. Like you just end up with a bunch of red and white cards that just happen to combine pretty well without caring about tribes.
That's a good point. And you know what it makes me think of is the blue-white deck that we described earlier. This is like that, except for that the cards are better and they work better together, even though they don't have that many synergies, within each other. But this deck just has this assertive game plan that a lot of these cards work really well for. Like, I say Fathom Fleet Firebrand. Well, do you think that's a defensive or an offensive card, right? If I say Tillinolly's Knight, are you like, well, would I like to attack with that or block with that, right? It's like, oh, I see. I want to attack with it, right? And each of these cards and, plenty of these commons, Headstrong Brute, Thrash of Raptors, what do those make you think of? Attacking, right? They all want to attack. And that's why I think this deck ends up coming together. It's not because you get some gold cards in here or whatever. It's not that. It's just that the game plan is more closely aligned. All right, ways to get into red-white. First pick a Territorial Hammerskull, a Fire Cannon Blast. If you're lucky, maybe a Charging Monstrosaur. Really any of the cards on the premium uncommons list. Here's a perfect example. Okay, you get a bad rare, and the uncommons are kind of janky, and you're like, I'm just going to take a Hammerskull. This happens all the time in the format. Okay, I got a Hammerskull. Pass the pack to you. The rare's missing. Uncommon's not quite there. There's Fire Cannon Blast. I'll take it. Ta-da! You did it. You're now in red white. Now, obviously, you can change colors and blah, 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 but that's how you get into this. Like these commons, or, maybe you first pick a Charging Monstrosaur, they get a Fire Cannon Blast, and then you get a third pick Hammerskull. You're like, okay, well, let's do it. And then you're just red white. Or, you can get lucky and get a great rare like a Captivating Crew or Repeating Barrage or, something like that and try to make that work as well. But there's nothing you're just picking good red and white cards, and you look down and you've got good cards that are red and good cards that are white. And you're like, all right, well, I'm doing this. There's no big signpost or whatever. It's just having critical mass of good playable cards in these colors.
Yeah, and what's nice is that even if the person to your right is some of your colors, frequently they're going to be caring about cards that are very different than what you care about. You're fine as long as your curve is fine.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of the cards that you mentioned for the for your black-white vampires part, right? A lot of the key like Vampire Zeal. Sure, you can play it. It's not great for you. It's just there. Bishop Soldier, you can play it, but it's not like a key card in your deck. And you can just kind of go down the list. Skyblade of the Legion, whatever. You can play it if you want, but you just don't need it. Skeleton for this deck. So what does it look like? Well, you want 5 to 6 2-drops with either 2 or 3 power, ideally. This is going to make up the core of the deck. This is still a traditional aggressive deck, and that means you need 2s. They're really, really important. Be an adult. Take them. Even if you see a pretty good 4 or 5 drop, you got to make sure you get enough critical mass on 2 drops, or else your deck kind of doesn't have the punch that it needs in the early part of the game. You can get 3 to 5 removal spells in this deck. I mean, 5 is a little high perhaps, but you've got cards like Pious Interdiction at common. You've got the 2 burn spells at common, plus the uncommons get really good with the ones that we've already mentioned. Some of the good stuff like Ixalan's Binding and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of removal in this color pair, and you can actually pick up quite a bit of it. So that's good. Make sure, though, that you don't prioritize the ones that attack you, like the ones that are for attacking. I mentioned this a little bit later, but, the cards like Settle the Wreckage and Bright Reprisal get a little worse in a deck like this, where the premium becomes removing a blocker. You want to get a blocker out of the way and attack them. That's the deal. Because what ends up happening is, and my next point, by the way, for the skeleton is as many territorial hammer skulls as you can get, because those work in conjunction with removal to make sure that your opponent never gets to have a good block. And it's just that simple. Your curve usually stops at 5 unless you get something crazy like a Burning Sun's Avatar or some, crazy 6-mana bomb.
Sometimes you'll play a Suncrown Raptors, but for the most part, you're really topping out at your unfriendly fires. Exactly.
That's the peak, or God willing, Charging Monster-Saur. You can go to 16 lands, no problem. If your curve is low, you don't generally have mana sinks, and if you're not, jamming a bunch of those 6s or too many 5s and 4s, you can feel free to go down to 16. And for kind of a bigger picture perspective, this plays mostly like a cab style deck, right? So if you listen to the show a lot, you'll know that's the cards that affect the board state. And these are, cards. Just take a look at your deck that you're laying out. And if the cards you have don't attack, they're not a combat trick or not a removal spell, it really needs to justify its existence. Like it needs to be a card that really fits your theme, or just has such raw power that you just couldn't see cutting it. Because if it doesn't do those things, it should be out of the deck. You're trying to get your opponent dead, clean, pure and simple. Some of the notes here, a lot of people will call this deck the Dinosaurs deck, but it's a sub theme. This is not the main theme of the deck. You will have some cards like the ones that we mentioned before, the Tilonali's Knights and that kind of thing, the Pterodon Knights. Those will get bumps from dinosaurs, but you do not need to prioritize dinosaurs over it, like Nest Robber, for example. You don't need to put that in your deck just because you need more dinosaurs. It's very rare that build comes together. And, as an example, Adanto Vanguard's the best 2-drop. It's a vampire.
Oh, for sure.
It doesn't have anything else going on. Thrash of Raptors and Tilonali's Knights are the most potent payoffs for that. And Pterodon Knight is also a thing, as we discussed. I mentioned already the next one about removal that gets blockers out of the way. Raptor Companion's just okay. You can play it, no problem. Like jam it. It's 3 power. It works well with Territorial Hammer Skull to get in a bunch of damage, but it hasn't really been a super great card for me. While Shining Aerosaur, if you need a 5, is actually a little better than you might think. The card, it's kind of hard to kill. It has evasion. It blocks well. I've been really happy with Shining Aerosaur for what looked like kind of a garden variety 5-drop. I've been like, this card actually does work. I have it slightly higher than that now, even in a deck like this.
Yeah, you don't need very many, but it is a good way. It's just a pretty burly, flying threat that will eventually finish the game.
Yeah, and that's the thing you kind of want. Combat tricks in these colors are pretty good. You have Vampire Zeal. You can play it without that many vampires. It's still +2/+2 for cheap. Sure Strike is, replacement level, but very playable. You can put that card in your deck. So put a few of those in there. And if you want, there is a sort of subversion of the deck with like swashbuckling, kind of all-in style. And you can do that. That is a thing that can work if you want. You'll want to prioritize random 1-drops a little higher than you would normally. But I've also found it largely unnecessary to have it in the deck because I find that the game plan's pretty solid on its own, and you don't need to take like the kind of crazy risk that swashbuckling gives you. So I wouldn't feel compelled to do it, but it is a strategy that can do things. So
you're not into buckling swashes?
I'm whatever on it. Like, I think you can do it, if you build the deck around it correctly. I don't anticipate it being the best strategy in the format by the time the dust settles on it. I think it'll be like, that was something that you could do. But, I mean, you know me. Like, I like to play decks that are a little more well-rounded than that. And if it's an aggressive deck, that's fine. It's just that, like, I'd like it so that if I do find myself a little bit behind, I'm not just, running swashbuckling on my 1/1 and hoping to block, right? Like, I can just play a little bit better of a 2-drop and have a slightly slower curve, but still get them dead. But like I said, if you're into swashbuckling, just make sure that you lower your curve down a bit and really try to set up for the turn 2 swashbuckling or the turn 3 swashbuckling, to really maximize pressure early and get your value out of it before they kill your creature. That's it. Those are the decks that I've been interacting with and playing the most. But they're all pretty good.
I like vampires because the ability to just grind out like a card at a time. I don't know. It satisfies one of the things I like about Magic, but I think that all these decks are fine. I'm not going to lie and say I like drafting red white a ton. It's just not exactly my cup of tea.
Yeah, I've been doing it because it gets the wins, but I agree. I think Vampires is the best. It has the most well-rounded game plan out of all of them. All right, so that's going to do it. Anything else we wanted to anything you want to put a point on or anything before we take off, Luis?
I don't think so. I think that this format is pretty fast. 2-drops matter a lot, and we're not going to see as much evolution of this format as we did in Hour of Devastation. So yeah, we're gonna have to put that little dream to death. All right, that is going to do it for the show this week. I want to remind you about channelfireball.com. That is the place to go for all things that you may need, which are Magic related. That's a hell of a sentence right there. You can also find free content. That's right, free. You just go there. You don't need to sign up. There's no monthly whatever. You just go and you're going to get awesome content from some of the best players in the world. We mentioned the Frank Karsten article this week, and then you get stuff from Owen Turtenwald. You get videos from me, Luis, Reed Duke, me and a bunch of very good players, basically, and it's great. This is one of the coolest ways to learn. It wasn't always available. When I first started playing Magic again, this stuff was around. It was a little new. It was still new, but this is a lot of the way that I got up to speed quickly was by watching really great players like you, Luis, in fact, draft and play. And it's entertaining. It's fun. You feel like you're hanging out with the person, but also you can pick up some pointers along the way. Take advantage of it. I mean, this is stuff that, like, if you're watching these things and your opponents are not, you are just going to have an edge. You're going to see something, you're going to have a better understanding, and it kind of, it'll all come out in the wash. And while you're there, pick up anything you need, single seal product, supplies, all of that at channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, I am Marshall_LR. And Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast over at lrcast.com, including links to Luis's stream. I haven't streamed in a while, but I still have one. And all the other stuff that we do, my YouTube channel, my Magic YouTube channel that's not LR, blah, 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 blah. That's going to do it for this one. See you next time. Okay, Luis, are you ready for this? I suppose so.
So I was approached by a nice guy named Glenn Newhall, who handed me this package of cards that says, it says Stump the Vargas Expert Edition, which is kind of an inauspicious start since it's called Let's Stump Vargas. But I get his point here. And what he's done is he's created a game. This is a game that he made for us to play. It says the rules of the game. So this is Expert Edition. I don't know if you're ready for this, but it says the game will consist of 3 rounds with 5 cards each. In each round, LSV will get 1 point for explaining what the card does, and will have the opportunity to earn bonus points as well. This gives him a total possible 30 points for your score. As the cards are all from Magic's history, at any time, LSV can ask for the addition of the card in question, and he has made this. So I honestly have no idea what to expect from this, but let's just give it a shot and see if this is fun or if we have to yell at Glenn Newhall next time we see him for making us a bad game. So I'm trying to open up this thing. All right, there we go. So I think he's got some paper in here. He does. All right, he's got some paper in here. All right, Scott-Vargas Expert Edition. Rules of the game, we got that. And then I've got a scorecard here. All right, so I guess I'll keep your score. Yeah. All right, round 1, the vanilla quiz, it says. First up are 5 vanilla creatures. Marshall, which he spelled wrong, will give LSV the name of the creature. For 1 point, LSV must give the mana cost and power and toughness of the creature. For a second point, LSV must name the first creature that was printed with that combination of converted mana costs or power and toughness.
All right.
Oh, this is kind of fun, isn't it? All right. I'm into it. All right. So the first one up. So I say the name, right? That's what he said? Yeah. Okay. Great Heart.
Great Heart is...
So you need to give me the mana cost and the power and toughness of this creature.
Yeah.
If you can.
No, I'm breaking on this. I know it's green, obviously.
Is it, though?
Yeah. I think so. I don't know this one at all.
Okay, so it's white.
Oh.
This is from Born of the Gods. You don't remember this? This is like a majestic Elmer, like bellowing into the mist here.
Oh, is this a 4-mana 2/4?
Yeah. Remember, we're starting with the vanilla quiz.
Oh, right. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. 3 and a white for a 2/4.
Okay, I'm going to give you that one because it's clear that you were warming up still. Now, what about first printed?
Oh.
So this would be the first 3 and a white 2/4.
Oh, is that Pillarfield Ox?
No, it is Foot Soldiers from Portal.
Come on.
Yeah, oh, he got you. Yeah. All right, so 0 bonus points for Luis. B, the next card I should say, Maritime Guard.
So this is a 1 and a blue for a 1/3.
That is correct.
And
when was it?
Say the first one was Lumengrid Warden.
It is Talas Merchant. He's really getting you here.
I don't count Portal as canon, so I
actually don't either, but he does, and so you're in on it. Borderland Minotaur.
Oh, this is a 3 and a red for a 3/3.
Close enough. It's 2 red, but
2 red, sure.
Yeah, which might matter actually. Actually, that does matter for the first printed. I'll tell you,
it's
this
not
first
Hill Giant then.
Oh well, it's a 4/3. It's a 4/3.
Oh, it's a 4/3. I thought you said 3. Oh,
no. Yeah, Borderland Minotaur, 2 red, 4/3. Is that not what you said? I thought that's what you said.
Oh, I said 3/3. I got it wrong.
Okay. Well, 0 then. And I'll tell you what, this is not in Portal. Yes, you did it. Very good. That was in Tempest. A set which you know remarkably well, by the way.
Yes.
Warpath Ghoul.
2 and a black for a 3/2.
That is correct. When was it first? When was 2 and a black? Oh, also I lied. And I'm going to give you a little hint here. So this is the first creature that was printed with that combination of converted mana cost and power toughness. So it is not, in fact, it doesn't have to be 2 and a black. It's 3 mana, 3 mana 3/2. That was my fault though. All right, it is. I'll give you a hint. It's from Ice Age.
Yeah, it's no.
It's Balduvian Barbarians, which you would certainly recognize.
That costs 1 red.
Yes, that's what I said.
It's not,
3 mana. Yeah, buddy.
I did know Balduvian Barbarians.
All right. What about Tusked Colossadon?
I don't know this one at all.
This one's vanilla.
What set's it from?
It's from Dragons or Cons. I can't remember. Does it matter? It's from that block. The one with the shield with the cross, the 2 swords in front. I don't remember what set that is, but. So this is 4GG65.
All right.
And, oh, this is great. So what was the first one for that? You're not going to get this one. I'll give you a hint, though. It's from Legends.
6 mana, 6/5?
Yeah, named after a famous East Coast magician.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's Gerard of the Closed Fist.
All right.
All right. So you got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 points on that one. Round 2, possibly playable. Next up are 5 of the worst cards from all of Magic. Marshall will give LSV, by the way, he spelled my name right this time. We'll give LSV the name of the card. And for 1 point, LSV will give the text of the card.
Okay.
Then for an additional point, LSV must convince Marshall that the card is playable, and then he spelled my name wrong again. So this is getting very confusing. Obviously, you're not going to be able to convince me. Well, maybe you will. All right. So first card is Bargain.
Bargain?
Oh, I see. This is from Portal or something.
If it's a Portal card, I'm not going to guess it.
All right. We're off it. You're now best of 28. By the way, Bargain is 2 and a white sorcery. Target opponent draws a card. You gain 7 life.
Not a very good bargain. I agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Next one. You know this one, or at least you know the card. It is Wood Elemental.
This is 3 and a green.
Mm-hmm.
It's an XX. It's powered up to equal to the number of untapped forests you sacrifice when you play Wood Elemental.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Go. Convince me.
So what am I supposed to convince you? That
You're supposed to convince me that it might be playable. Oh, this is good.
Wood Elemental is...
Give me, like, is there a combo deck that maybe cares about forests
If you
going
use
away?
like Nissa World Waker and you untap all your forests, then you play a Wood Elemental. You tap them all for mana. You untap them all. You play a Wood Elemental, and you make like a 4 mana 6/6.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in for the 4 mana 6/6 post Planeswalker. All right. Next card is called, and by the way, it's also from Legends. It's called North Star. I don't even know if I've ever seen this card.
So it's like I know the picture. It's like a picture of like a woman made out of like stars, kind of. Or
Yeah, she's got a thing. Yeah,
4 mana artifact.
Yes.
God, it's something like it's got an activated ability. It's like 3 and tap or 2 and tap, and it like God, it does something horrible.
Yeah, it does. Just give me a ballpark, and I'm willing to, because this one is templated horrendously, and
it's something like no. I don't know
this
exactly.
card is
it like untaps a creature or something like that.
Oh, it's way worse than that. Man, Glenn went deep here. So North Star, pay 4, tap it. You may cast 1 spell this turn by paying its casting cost with any type of mana. And then this is, by the way, classic templating. It has a for example.
Oh God.
Yeah, but it doesn't pay any of the mana for it.
Yes.
So you're just adding 4 mana to be able to cast the spell without paying its cost. So tell me.
I guess this is good at. Is there like a cheap card with a lot of colored mana symbols? I don't know. This one, I don't think I'm getting there on this one.
All right, yeah, this one's just too bad. Okay, quite possibly the worst card in the history of Magic.
Is this Sorrow's Path?
Yes, sir.
This is a land. It does not tap for mana. You can tap it to switch 2 blocking creatures.
Yep.
All blocks must still be legal.
Yep.
Whenever a Sorrow's Path becomes tapped, it deals 2 damage to you and all the creatures you control.
Yeah, that is exactly. Wow, you nailed that. That's from the dark too. Holy
This card is
crap!
just so goddamn bad.
Oh yeah, it's one of the worst.
So the combo with this is you donate to them and then use Icy Manipulator to keep tapping it, and they keep taking damage.
Sold. I would love to win a game through that. All right, last one is called Malignant Growth, and it's from Mirage.
This is like Mirage or something. It's like 3 black green or something along those lines.
It's close. That's close. It is 5 mana, and it does have green in the mana cost.
Oh, blue-green. Sorry, 3 blue.
That's right. 3 blue-green.
It's like cumulative upkeep of 1 and...
That's right.
whenever you pay cumulative upkeep, you like take a damage and draw a card or something for...
Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading it and trying to figure out the hell it does.
Something like that.
Oh, wow. This is so. Yeah, you were really close. So the way it's templated is weird, but so cumulative upkeep 1, during your upkeep, you put a growth counter on it. So that's just whatever, tracking something. But it says during target opponent's draw phase, he or she draws an additional card for each growth counter on it. And then for each card that opponent draws this way, it does 1 damage to him or her.
Oh, so it's what I said, except it does it to your opponent?
Yes.
So you necropotence your opponent?
Yes. So I'm giving you credit for that because this card's absurdly, like I had to read it just to figure out what it did. Now, how are you going to convince me to let my opponent draw a bunch of cards?
Well, if you have like a bunch of Howling Minds and Malignant Growths, yeah, I don't know. Exactly.
I feel like Howling Mind might be offended that you mentioned Malignant Growth in the same sentence. No, you have not convinced me. You will not be getting a bonus point for that one. All right, last round 5, round 3, last 5 cards. LSV Gate Oracle Text. I don't know what this means. Oh, Gate Oracle. Anyway, here we go. Are you ready? Last up are 5 cards whose original wording is no longer supported by Magic rules. Oh boy. Thus, these cards have significantly different Oracle text than what is printed on them. Marshall will give LSC the name of the card. LSC gets 1 point for giving the complete text as printed on the card, and an additional point for giving the current Oracle text for the card. If LSV has no idea what the card is, Marshall can give him the original text, and LSV can still get 1 point for the Oracle text. Love it. This is just stupid. Okay. So I'm going to tell you the card, False Summoning, which is, by the way, another portal card.
Yeah. I actually know this card. Because this is 1 in a blue. It's a sorcery. And play only directly after your opponent plays a creature, and that creature must be discarded?
Let's see here. Play False Summoning only in response to another player playing a creature. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yes. That creature card has no effect, and that player puts it into his or her graveyard.
So it's just a counterspell. It's Essence Scatter.
Yeah. Okay. And then so that's what it says. So I'm going to give you credit for that one. What's the Oracle text?
Counter target creature spell?
Yeah. That's exactly right. Oh, that's gas. All right. Next card is called Firestorm Phoenix.
Okay, so this is...
Oh, man. This guy went deep.
I want to say it's 4 red for like a 3/2 flyer.
You are right. Holy crap. I can't believe you got that far.
It's from Legends, and when it goes to the graveyard, return it to your hand. Mm-hmm. But I think the original text, if it goes, it applies if it goes to the graveyard from anywhere.
You're close. So it has an extra. Everything you said is true. It also says it may not be summoned again until owner's next turn.
Oh, I see. So
that's kind of weird, but whatever. I'm giving you credit for that because this is incredibly difficult. So what do you think the Oracle text is on this?
When
this is hard.
Dies, return it to its owner's hand. Reveal it. I don't know how they templated this. I have no idea.
Okay, it says flying. If Firestorm Phoenix would die, return Firestorm Phoenix to his owner's hand instead. So it's like a replacement effect or whatever that's called. Okay. Until that player's next turn, that player plays with that card revealed in his or her hand and can't play it.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh man, that is awesome. All right. Next up, Rock Hydra.
Oh, so this is X red for a star for a 0/0.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
With X +1 with X head counters at plus, and they're +1/+1.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever damage is dealt to Rock Hydra, remove that many heads instead. Red. Rock Hydra grows another head. Use this ability only during your upkeep.
Oh, I'm super giving this to you. So this is what it says. It says put X +1/+1 counters, and then it says parentheses heads on Hydra. Each point of damage Hydra suffers kills 1 head unless controller spends red per head. During controller's upkeep, new heads may be grown for red apiece. I'm not kidding. That's literally what it says on the card. All right. You going to take a shot at the Oracle text? You shouldn't, by the way.
No,
maybe you should. All right. So it says the Oracle text is Rock Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. You would have gotten that, right? For each 1 damage that would be dealt to Rock Hydra, if it has a +1/+1 counter on it, remove a +1/+1 counter on it and prevent that 1 damage. Red, prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to Rock Hydra this turn. Red, put a +1/+1 counter on Rock Hydra, activate this ability only during your upkeep. That's actually pretty clever. Okay, 2 more cards. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
You know this one. Necromancy.
So this is 2 and a black. It's an enchantment. When Necromancy enters the battlefield, return a target creature in a card in a graveyard into play. And
this is absurd.
And
there's a book on the front of this card.
And if Necromancy dies, then bury the creature. You may play Necromancy as an instant. If you do, sacrifice Necromancy at end of turn.
I mean, you're close enough. I'm super giving this to you. But, like, this was printed in the time when bury was a thing. Like, the text is, first off, you may choose to play Necromancy as an instant. If you do, bury it at end of turn. When you play Necromancy, choose target creature card in a graveyard. When Necromancy comes into play, put that creature into play as though it were just played, and Necromancy becomes a creature enchantment. The target's a creature. If Necromancy leaves play, bury that creature. Here's the Oracle text. I'm not even giving you a shot at this because this is just too absurd.
Well, it involves substance and counters and stuff.
Does it?
I
haven't read it yet. All right, here we go. You may cast Necromancy as if it had flash. If you cast it any time a sorcery couldn't have been cast, the controller of the permanent it becomes sacrifices it at the beginning of the next cleanup step. When Necromancy enters the battlefield, if it's on the battlefield, it becomes an aura with enchant creature put onto the battlefield with Necromancy. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control and attach Necromancy to it. When Necromancy leaves the battlefield, that controller's controller sacrifices it. That is absurd. All right, last one. Also impossible. Camouflage.
This is green. It's an instant. Play only during declare blockers step. Switch or during declare attacker step. All attackers are flipped face down, and defender may declare blocks or something like that. Basically, all attackers get turned face down, and your opponent has to try and block them without knowing what the attackers are.
Yes, you're totally right. How did you know that? You didn't play this at any point, did you?
No, I don't.
Did you win a Pro Tour with this or something back in the day? It says you may rearrange your attacking creatures and place them face down, revealing which is which only after defense is chosen. If this results in impossible blocks, such as non-flying creatures blocking flying creatures, illegal blockers cannot block this turn. All right, the Oracle text is cast Camouflage only during your declare attacker step. This turn, instead of declaring blockers, each defending player chooses any number of creatures he or she controls and divides them into a number of piles equal to the number of attacking creatures for whom that player is defending. For whom that player is the defending player. Creatures he or she controls that can block additional creatures may likewise be put into additional piles. Assign each pile to a different one of those attacking creatures at random. Each creature in a pile that can block the creatures that pile is assigned to does so. Piles can be empty.
All right.
That has to be the worst.
I'm about ready to be done with this challenge. Just tell me my score.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You know what? You did pretty good, man. You got 15. And I got to tell you, 15 out of, I actually killed 2 things, so 15 out of 28. That's damn respectable. This was a hard game. But I like what you did, Glenn. Thanks for the game.
Yeah, this was cool, but it was pretty hard.
It was a little hard. All right, we'll see you next time.